Today on Great Books, Big Ideas, I begin a series of videos focused on Volume 1 of the Great Books of the Western World, The Great Conversation, by Robert Maynard Hutchins, who was the editor-in-chief of the book's first edition, which was published in 1952. The Great Conversation is a long essay in 10 short chapters with a preface, plus a section on possible approaches to the set. Hutchins, in this essay, provides a rationale for the great books, why we should read them, the value of studying them, how we might go about using them, and how the books were selected. By starting here, you can decide whether this 54-volume set might be worth your time. Robert Maynard Hutchins is a sober, lucid, polemical writer. He's a man with strong opinions and isn't afraid to be straightforward in presenting them. Before we get into the essay proper, in this episode, I want to look at the preface because it lays out some of the major themes he's going to develop. Hutchins starts out by touting the enduring value of masterpieces in the Western tradition. He admits that this list of great books is constantly in flux. Each generation should reassess the relevance of said books and make room for new inclusions. As he says, and I'm quoting, "It is the task of every generation to reassess the tradition in which it lives, to discard what it cannot use, and to bring into context with the distant and intermediate past the most recent contributions to the great conversation. This set of books is the result of an attempt to reappraise and re-embody the tradition of the West for our generation." And again, this is the early 1950s, post-World War II America, and we're now 70 years past that point, 70 plus years, and we may well wonder what has become of tradition in an age where the Western tradition itself has come under so much fire. Is this a tradition that can be reclaimed for our generation? I would answer yes. We ignore historical legacies at our peril. But should we reassess the canon of great works? Absolutely. I'm totally in agreement with Robert Maynard Hutchins on this point. That's half the fun of reading classics, is thinking about the canon and what goes in and what goes out. That's like sort of a vibrant, vital, constantly in flux type of list. Now, Hutchins seems prescient in his awareness that the Western tradition is under threat. As he says, the West needs to recapture and re-emphasize and bring to bear upon its present problems the wisdom that lies in the works of its greatest thinkers and in the discussion that they have carried on. Hutchins is also aware that Western civilization was entering a period of crisis. Quote, "We are as concerned as anybody else at the headlong plunge into the abyss that Western civilization seems to be taking. We believe that the voices that may recall the West to sanity are those which have taken part in the great conversation." Interesting that he's using these terms of crisis. What is this crisis that he sees? Well, first, the fact that the great books have vanished from education and adult reading. Second, that our moral, intellectual, and spiritual lives have deteriorated. As he puts it, adults have come to lead lives comparatively rich in material comforts and very poor in moral, intellectual, and spiritual tone. Third, part of the crisis, as he puts it, we believe that the reduction of the citizen to an object of propaganda, private and public, is one of the greatest dangers to democracy. Think about that. Ain't that the truth? It's only gotten worse in the last 70 years. It's incumbent upon us to strengthen our minds so that we can resist the sloganeering, the fake news, the storm of propaganda, as he puts it, and judge the truth for ourselves. How does one equip oneself for such a task? By reading the good and the great books and immersing yourself in the great conversation that's been swirling in and out of our civilization for thousands of years. That's his answer to it. He thinks that great books will cultivate the habit of mind needed to form valid judgments. Next, Hutchins turns to a critique of modern education. This is education as it was in the mid-20th century, in his mind. He really believes that great books are the best educational instrument for young people and adults today. In the first half of the 20th century, as he puts it, great books virtually vanished from American education. And the reinsertion of a book set like the one he is expounding upon here thus appears to be more novel than it actually is. I think he sees it as a return to form. And there's last 50 years has been an educational aberration. Hutchins believes in democracy, but an uneducated democratic citizenry is a mortal threat to democracy. To quote him, democracy requires everybody to have a liberal education. That's an idealistic notion, admittedly, but I think it's one worth striving for. Hutchins wants his great books set to reimagine the education of adults. He believes that all adults are obligated to educate themselves for the whole course of their lives. Education is so much more than the formal schooling you get, K through 12 or undergrad or grad school or professional school. In fact, he says that adults are the primary reading audience for this great books of the Western world set. And at his moment in history, people had enough leisure time to become more educated, more well-rounded, wiser. They would have the time to immerse in these books if they chose to use it that way. Next, Hutchins discusses the selection process. Here are the authors that are part of this set. In your first edition. How do they make it into this list? Well, he talks about which books would make the cut and the criteria that they used. The editorial board used these questions. They asked, does the book contribute to the great conversation? Now, they make no claim that all the great books are included in this set, only that the ones in this set are great. They also admitted the Holy Bible because it was already widely available and it would be redundant to publish it. They decided to present the volumes in chronological order, and they didn't subdivide the books into historical periods, however. It's just author after author in rough chronology. They stopped publishing at the 20th century. Sigmund Freud is the only one who barely sneaks in with some of his books, because the editors doubted that they could accurately judge the merits of recently published books. They just didn't have enough perspective. Some writers they left out because their greatness lay in the total body of their work instead of an individual title. So, for example, Balzac's Human Comedy is cited as an example of that. I guess their argument is you kind of have to read the whole oeuvre instead of just an isolated novel. They published these books with just a few exceptions as complete books and not excerpts. So that was important to them too. Like, we're giving you the whole enchilada here. And he insists that the books were not chosen with the aim of propagating a dogma or a point of view. The editors want you, the reader, to make up your mind which books to trust. The idea is it's a conversation, it's a back and forth between authors as you move through history, and there's a wide range of opinions and views on what is true. Also, he talks about how they confined the list to the Western tradition. Why was that? Is Hutchins too stuck up about the Western tradition? Too exceptionalist about it? Well, he goes to pains to state that he doesn't think the West is best. It's not better than the great books of the Eastern world. He just thinks it's important to understand our own tradition. And he hopes that one day there will be a unified great books of the world set, which he envisions would do much to advance the unity of mankind. He also provides a rationale for why math and science books were included, despite reservations, despite the fact that very few people would be likely to reading those texts. And he also explains why they did not include scholarly introductions to the texts. So you go into these volumes, you basically get a little biographical note at the very beginning, and then you just the book. You just start reading the books. As he puts it, quote, "The books should speak for themselves, and the reader should decide for himself. Great books contain their own aids to reading. This is one reason why they are great." I really like the egalitarian spirit of that statement. He really has a faith in the common man's aptitude for learning. One concession he did make to helping people wade through this gargantuan set of books was the addition of a massive 2-volume Syntopicon, they called it. This was the brainchild of Mortimer Adler, and it is essentially an index of the great ideas. Here on the inside back cover, you have the list of great ideas. So for each of these ideas, there would be a introductory article about that idea, and then a list of cross-references to passages in the book set, and also passages in books that are not included in this set. So it's like this vast index of ideas. So you could cross-cut through the books. It's an interesting idea. Maybe down the road I'll do some videos about it. So that's the preface. But what do you think? Do you share Hutchins's assumptions about the tradition of the West, about the state of education, about the need for adults to become lifelong learners, about the process used to select this list of titles? There's so much that we can talk about here. We're just getting started. I hope you leave some comments to continue the conversation. And then the next episode for this playlist series, I want to dive into the essay itself. We'll look at the first chapter called The Tradition of the West. I hope you'll like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss the next installment. And I thank you for sharing your time with me, and happy reading.